All right, so welcome to our webinar today on Southwest Minnesota Arts Council's Quick Support for Artists grants for fiscal year 2022, which for us runs from July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. I am Carolyn Koska, the grants administrator here at Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. And first, I'll just run down a little outline of what we're going to talk about tonight. I'll do a brief introduction to Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. We'll take a look at the guidelines for this grant program. We'll go over to our website and take a look at what resources are available for you there. Then we'll head into our grant system and walk through the application for this grant program. And we'll finish up talking about our grant process, or what happens after you submit an application. We'll stop a couple times for questions. So if you want to kind of note things that might come up as we're going along here. And then at the end, we'll open things up as well if you'd like to talk more about your specific projects. So the Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, or SMAC, is a nonprofit organization committed to promoting and encouraging the development of the arts in the 18 counties of Southwest Minnesota by serving as a source of funds and technical services, which enable local organizations, educational institutions, and individuals to sponsor, create, and promote the arts in their communities. So this is our region down in the southwest corner of the state. We are one of 11 regional arts councils that cover the whole state of Minnesota. And most of our funding comes from the state of Minnesota through an allocation from their general fund, but also mostly through the Arts and Cultural Heritage or Legacy Fund. We also receive funding from the McKnight Foundation, which we use for some of our artist grants, and also from individuals and organizations in our region. Some things that we are committed to include supporting artists and arts organizations in creating, producing, and presenting high-quality arts activities, overcoming barriers to accessing high-quality arts activities, instilling the arts into the community and public life, supporting high-quality, age-appropriate arts education for all ages to develop knowledge, skills, and understanding of the arts, and supporting events and activities that represent the diverse ethnic and cultural arts traditions of the region. So some things to keep in mind as you're thinking about grant projects you might like to do, as everything needs to ultimately relate back to these commitments that we have. On to our Quick Support for Artists grant program. This is a new program for us this year, and it is open to people who are at least 18 by the time of applying and signing their grant contract. You need to live in one of the 18 counties of our service region or on tribal lands within that area. And we acknowledge that this region occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people. So you'll need to be living in our region for at least 6 months before applying for a grant, and also remain in the region during the grant contract period. And all arts disciplines are accepted for this grant program. And our intent with this program is to provide artists with funds that they can access a lot more quickly than in our other grant programs that we have that have usually 2 deadlines within a year. So there are 2 kinds of projects that you can think about doing for this grant program. One is more artist focused and another is community focused. And we'll talk about both of those. So an artist-focused project could include things related to creating new work. So you might apply for things such as purchasing supplies or equipment, renting space, doing some research. You can pay yourself for your time that you spend working on your art, or this can also cover daycare costs if that is needed to allow you to work on your art. You may, under the Artist Focus project, also do some sharing of your work. This could cover framing your work, doing some recording, um, getting some editing done in preparing for publishing, putting together a portfolio, creating a website. And finally, the last area under our artist focused projects would be artistic or professional development. If there are some classes or workshops you'd want to take, if you are going to be doing some intensive study with a mentor one-on-one, or possibly attending a conference. So that's what can all be encompassed in that artist focused project. And then our other type of project would be a community focused project. So this would be you doing something in your community, helping them to either experience art in a different way or reaching out to a part of your community that is not normally exposed to your art form. So some kind of community focused activity. These grants are available for up to $1,000. There are no matching funds required, which means that you will not need to put up any of your own money towards the project unless the project is going to cost more than that $1,000. There are some things that we cannot pay for with the funds for this grant program. Equipment requests that aren't specifically tied to the project that you're going to be doing. We can't pay for travel outside the state of Minnesota since for this grant we are using state funds. We can't pay for credits or materials to fill degree requirements for students. College students are eligible to apply, but they need to be asking for something related to a project that's totally separate from their education. We also can't fund applications that are mostly about developing curriculum plans or teaching materials. We are really hoping that this will help you focus on your work specifically as an artist rather than a teacher. We can't pay for requests for new building construction or purchase of real estate. Also ineligible are activities for the religious socialization of the participants or audience, activities that attempt to influence any state or federal legislation, payments of debts incurred before the grant begins, applicants that have a past grant from us still in progress. So artists can only be working on one grant project at a time with us, or if you have a past due final report. So that's a quick overview of some things to be aware of related to eligibility. It's a good thing to check the program guidelines, and we also have some general guidelines that apply to all of our grant programs, just to make sure you are not missing anything and you're on the right track. And we'll take a look at where to find those in a little bit here. So you'll need to have a start date and an end date for your project. Um, your start date is, we consider that as soon as you're starting any activities related to your project, even if you're just ordering supplies, if you're registering for a workshop that you're going to take, paying any sort of fees, holding auditions or rehearsals, or doing any sort of advertising relating to your project. And you can't spend any funds before that project start date. So with all that in mind, your start date should not be the date of your first activity that you're doing. So if you are taking a class, your start date should not be the first day of the class. It would need to be before that in order to allow you to register if there's some supplies that you need to purchase ahead of time. If there are things that you need to spend money on before that project start date, you cannot include those in the project budget for this grant. That would have to be totally separate from this grant budget. And as we mentioned before, no advertising before your start date. You'll also need to choose an end date for your project. And this year, our fiscal year 22, all the grant projects awarded this year will need to be finished up by June 30th of 2023. So deadlines for this program, here's where the quick support comes in. We have monthly deadlines, the first of the month starting August 1st through April 1st of 2022. And for all of those, the earliest project start date that you can have is the first day of the next month. So if you would apply by August 1st, during the month of August, your application would be evaluated and acted on whether it was going to be funded or not. And then your earliest project start date would be the 1st of September. So you would know within the month whether you receive the grant or not and be able to start your project right away. Also, just be aware of that applications have to be submitted by 4:30 p.m. on that deadline date. The system will not allow you to submit after that time. And I'm going to stop here for a second if there are any questions so far. I am not hearing anything as far as questions, so we are going to head over to our website. I'm going to point out a couple things here. On our homepage is where you can find the easiest place to access our grant system. So if you are on that homepage and scroll down beneath those slides, there's this black grants box here, and you've got a login button right there. That'll take you to our grant system, about the fastest way to get there. Then we're going to take a look at, under grants, we have this page called Workshops and Assistance. And this basically shows you all the ways you can get some help from us if you have some questions. So it talks about our grant support open office hours. Those are the second Tuesday of the month. You can stop into our office in Marshall anytime from 10 until 2 if you'd like to be sitting there working on your application. So we are right there. If you have some questions, you can do that, or just want to talk about a project. So that is available for you. We've got a couple of Q&A sessions coming up that cover all of our grant programs. There won't be much as far as a presentation, but you can certainly get any questions answered about any of our grant programs. So our first one for the year for that is coming up on August 10th. You also can set up some time to meet with me if you'd like to. You can grab a time on my calendar there. That could be by phone, Zoom, or in person. And then we have all of our webinars here on all of our grant programs for the year. And you'll see the ones that have already gone past. We've got links to recordings, and the ones coming up, links to register. And now we're going to head over to our grants for individual artists. And we are looking at our quick support grants today. So here on the page for our grants, we've got some information just explaining again how those deadlines work and when your application will be acted on, and reminder again when that earliest project start date is. Then we've got a bunch of materials posted for you here. This is a document with the guidelines for this grant program. Then here are those general grant guidelines that apply to all of our grant programs. We have the application questions in a Word document. Sometimes people like to work on their draft in that and paste their answers into the system later. We've got some budget forms here, and we'll talk about that when we get to the application. Here are the criteria that'll be used in scoring your application. Really good thing to take a look at those. Coming soon will be the questions from the final report if you want to look ahead at what you might have to answer there. And then we've got just a couple of tutorials here on using the grant system. But we're going to head up to our top. Here's the other spot that you can get to the grant system. We've got this Apply Now button. And it just takes you to the login, so you don't actually have to be applying to click it, but that is where we are headed. So on our login page here, if you already have made an account in the system, you would just log in. If you are brand new to the system, you can create a new account by clicking this button here. If you're not sure if you already have an account in the system or not, please contact us and we can get that figured out. I am going to log us in here. All right, so when you are logging in, if you have been in the system before, you'll come to your applicant dashboard here. But if this is your first time in the system, it'll actually take you directly to this apply page. So we're going to go over there. And this page lists all of the grants that we currently have open. We've got some of our grants for organizations first, and you'll just scroll through and find the one you need. Here are some of our artist grants, and here is our quick support. So just a quick overview of what that grant is about. If you'd like to just take a look at the application without actually starting anything, there's this preview button here. Otherwise, if you're ready to go, there is the apply button up in the corner here. So that's what we're going to click. All right, I'm just going to point out a few buttons at the top here. If you would like to be working on your application in a different language, we have Google Translate embedded in the system. You can select a language there and the whole interface will translate for you. We have our copy previous answers button. If you have created an application in the system before, you can click this button and choose to copy from that application into your new application. So if you have been in the system before, that can save some time. Then we have our collaborate button. And this allows somebody else to kind of come into your application and do some work as well. So what you would do is type in their email address here. You can choose what level of permission you'd like to give them, and then write a little message here asking them to do whatever it is you'd like them to do. If it's a teacher that you're going to be working with, maybe you'd like them to come in and attach some samples of their work, for instance, or maybe you'd like someone to read through your application for you. So you can just click that invite button once you've filled this out. They will receive an email, and all they'll need to do is just create a password to get into the system, and your application will be right there for them to take a look at. Again, we've got a reminder of a couple ways to get some questions answered or get some help on your application. We have this link here to, if you'd like to schedule some time with me, you can choose how you'd like to meet. And then that'll take you to my calendar and you can just choose a time on there. It'll create a meeting for us. Otherwise, feel free to email me anytime. Here's my email address here with any questions. Then we start out with just a reminder here that you need to be living within our service region in order to apply. So we have you select your county from the list there. Then we need a name for your project, just briefly saying what you're planning to do. Here you can put in the amount that you're planning to request, although it's a good idea to complete your budget form first before filling that in. Then we just ask you to verify some contact information, especially if you're returning to the system after a while. We've got some of those documents that we looked at before linked here again, and some tips for writing your application. I'll just touch on the character limits. You'll see that the limit for most of the fields is really big. We want to make sure that we are giving you plenty of space if you have something you have a lot to say about, but please don't feel like you need to fill in the whole text box. Depending on the question, you might just need a few sentences or a paragraph or two, as long as you are including everything that was asked about in that question. All right, so then we come to our project type. Here are two project types that we talked about before, the artist focused and the community focused. And we'll start out with the artist focused. When you select one of these, it'll bring up some specific questions related to that kind of project. So you'll start out describing your project. What are you going to do? If you're going to be creating some new work, what is it that you're hoping to create? Do you have a certain amount of work that you're hoping to create during this grant period? We also ask you to think about your artistic vision for the work. So you can think about, is there something in particular you're trying to say with your work? Is there a particular aesthetic that you're going for? Um, just what are you hoping this artwork will be? If your project has some sort of study opportunity that you are going to be attending, you could describe that here, and talk about the teacher's qualifications, if that makes sense for your opportunity. And then we also ask for you to outline your timeline for the project. This next section is completely optional. It just gives you some more space uh, to add some extra information. So if there's more that you want to either upload or link to about the class that you're going to be taking, if you want to attach something, some work by the teacher that you're going to be working with, if you want to provide some more specific information about particular equipment or supplies that you're going to be needing, or about a medium or technique that maybe not everyone would be familiar with. So here we've got a couple of uh, slots where you can upload a file or provide some links. So that section there is totally optional. Here's where you'll enter in your start and end date. Then we come to the budget. There are several ways that you can do your budget. We've got two different versions of our form here, in Excel and PDF, or you can also create your own budget document. We're going to take a look at the Excel form. All right, so here is our budget form. We've got a space here for you to put in the title of your project or your name. Then we've just got a whole large area for you here to enter in any costs that you will have. You can type in whatever you like there. And let's get some amounts in here. So if you scroll down, we'll see that this is adding up for us. So right now that is our total cost. Then we've got kind of a double check here for you to determine how much you can request. So it grabs your total cash cost, this $830 for you. So your request cannot exceed $830 or the maximum request amount for this grant program, whichever is less. So we would look in our list. Here's our quick support for artists, $1,000. And between the 1,000 and the 830, our 830 is less, so that's how much we can request. And then below that, if for instance your cash cost was more than the amount you can request, if it was say $1,500, then down here you could describe where your other funding towards the project is coming from. So you would fill this out, save it, and then upload that here into the application. We also have a budget narrative field here. You can add some more details about some of your costs that may not fit into your budget spreadsheet. If you want to add some information about how you calculated out how much you are paying yourself for your time, things like that. Then we ask about your art-related experience. We've got a couple options here. If you have an artist resume, you can upload that here. If not, you can feel free to just describe your training or accomplishments in this text box here. And we also ask if you do folk or traditional art, what is your connection to that cultural community? What kind of recognition do you and your work have from that community? Then we come to actually providing samples of your work. You can put in the address of your website if you have one. And then we have some instructions for providing different types of samples depending on the medium of your work. So if it's written materials, images, audio, video, we have a total of 8 upload fields, each of them 10 megabytes. So that's a bit of space there for you to upload things. If you need to combine multiple images or files into one PDF, we've got some links here explaining how you can do that. So here are all these fields where you can upload and describe what you're uploading of your samples. Again, the upload fields versus we've got some website fields here too. You can use either of those depending on what works best for your artwork. Then we ask you about the impact that you're expecting this project will have on you. We ask, how will this project contribute to your growth as an artist? What specific changes are you hoping for? It could be a change in your skills, knowledge, attitude, or behavior. Just what impact are you looking for this to have? And then we ask you, how do you plan to measure or prove that those changes you're hoping for have taken place? Some examples of what you could do to do this include getting some feedback from instructors or peers, comparing your new work to your older work, and looking for differences, or even using a journal to note your progress during the project. If you have some sort of evaluation tool that you're using, you can attach that here. Probably not likely, but that's just there in case. Then we've got just a section of some data collection. This does not have any bearing on your grant, just some data that we need to collect and pass on to the state. So some ethnic and other characteristics, number of people participating in your project. This may vary a lot depending on whether you are sharing your work as part of your project or not. And then we finish up with just a verification of your name and electronic signature. We are going to actually head back to the top now and change the project type that we selected and take a look at what's different for the community focused project. So again, in describing your project, what's your artistic vision? How will community members be involved? What is your timeline and how will you promote the project? Then we have our supplemental materials, dates, budget, those are all the same, experience, work samples. And then I think when we get down to our impact, that'll be slightly different. So you'll need to think both about the impact on you as an artist. Then also what impact do you expect the project will have on community members that are participating, and then measurement for both of those things. So that's the difference between those two project types in the application. So down at the bottom, we've got our Save Application button. It will have been auto-saving for you as you've been working, but you can also click the Save button here, and also here's the Submit for when you're ready, but we're going to click Save. And when you click that Save button, it tells you here are the remaining questions that you still need to answer. And since we didn't do anything, they're all here, but that'll help you just track your progress a little bit. If you'd like to go back and keep working, there's the Continue button here, but we're going to head back to our dashboard. And you'll see here is our application that we just started here. And if you want to go back and keep working on that, you'll just click this Edit Application link. And this is the same place that you come back to if you have a contract or a final report to complete. All right, let's head back to our slides here for a minute, and I will stop again if there are any questions at this point. All right, I have not heard any questions, so we will continue on. First, here we have just some tips for you to think about as you are working on an application. It's a really good idea to start early just to make sure you have time to gather all of the pieces that you need for your application. If you need to find some samples of your own work, some samples of a mentor's work, or just to figure out what your costs are actually going to be, or to get any questions answered from us. Make sure you read through both of those guidelines documents carefully, just to make sure you're not missing anything and you're on the right track. You saw in the application that a lot of the questions had multiple parts to them. So make sure that you are hitting all of those points in your answer. As I mentioned before, don't feel like you need to pad out your answers to fill up those text boxes, but just be clear and concise and make sure you are covering everything that was asked. There's no need for any special grant writing language. Feel free to just write as if you were telling someone you know about the project that you're doing. But while you're doing that, it is a good idea to assume that the people reviewing your grant don't know anything about you or your project. We draw grant review panelists from our entire region, so it is likely that many of them may not be familiar with you or your work. So it's a good idea to have somebody take a read through your application who's not totally familiar with what it is that you're trying to do, just to make sure that everything makes sense for someone outside of your head. As we mentioned before, there are several ways to get some assistance. You can call us if you want to talk about your project even before you're starting an application, just to make sure you are starting in the right program, that the kinds of costs you're thinking about are eligible. You can contact us anytime with questions as you're filling out your application. Also, we can take a look at your application before you submit it. If you let us know up to about 2 weeks ahead of the deadline, we can guarantee that we're able to take a look at it. And we can read through and let you know if there's anything that you're missing, or if maybe it'd be better to come at a certain question from a little different angle. So if it's closer than that 2 weeks, we can't guarantee that we're able to look at it, but it is a really helpful thing to have us take a look. So what happens after you submit your application? The first thing is that we as staff will review your application for eligibility and completeness. If at that point we find that there's something missing or something affecting your eligibility, we will contact you and you get 48 hours to fix whatever the issue is. Then the applications will get passed on to some individuals from around our region who will score them based on the criteria for the program, which we'll look at in a second. And then their recommendations go to our board of directors who make the final funding decisions based on those recommendations. So the criteria that the reviewers will be using to look at your application, they'll look at your ability to accomplish the project, which would be things like, have you given yourself a reasonable amount of work to do during this time, or is it kind of a stretch, or do your costs seem right? Um, how well do they think your plan is going to work? So that is worth 5 points. And then they'll take a look at the impact of the project. So how is this going to affect you? How much growth will this possibly give you? And that is worth 8 points. So that is what they will be looking at. If you open that criteria document that we looked at before, it has a whole bunch of bullet points under each of these, so you can dig into that a little deeper. Then in between the reviewer scoring and the board of directors decision, applicants can be awarded an additional percentage point for each of these following criteria that they meet. If you are a first-time applicant to us, if you are from a BIPOC, LGBTQ, or disability community, or if you are from a county that has received fewer grants from us recently. So if your grant is awarded, you'll need to complete a contract. After that contract is completed, you'll receive 80% of your grant award around the time of your start date. Then you'll receive the remaining 20% after your project and your final report are completed. You'll need to acknowledge the grant and any marketing materials that you may have for your project. May need to use this Minnesota Legacy logo as well, depending on the source of funds that your grant came from. And for all of these, the credit lines, any posters or logos that you need, those will all be sent to you, so you'll know for sure what it is that you need to include. And those are also available on our website. You'll need to do a final report within 60 days after your project end date. And it's a good idea to take a look at the final report when you're just getting started on your project, just to know the kinds of things you might need to gather and be prepared to answer. So that is all for our quick support for artist grants. I'm just going to mention a couple other opportunities that are available for artists. Our artist equity grants provide up to $4,000, aiding Black, Indigenous, and other artists of color with projects that will advance their skills and artistic careers. That is an ongoing deadline. You can submit anytime through May 1st of 2022. We had a webinar a couple of weeks ago. The recording is available on our website if you'd like to check that out. And then we also have our individual artist grants for emerging and established career artists. Those provide $2,500 to emerging artists and up to $7,000 for established career artists. We also have our community collaboration grants, which provide up to $10,000 to artists to create a new work while collaborating with the community. And those, we have two deadlines this year, August 2nd and January 12th. And here's just our contact information again. And I will just open things up if there is anything you would like to talk about your specific project or any other questions that you have. I see I've got a question through the chat saying, do you consider rose mauling as a folk art that would be eligible for an artist grant? Yes, we have funded some rose mauling before, but that would definitely be something where you would need to explain kind of your connection to that folk tradition. And we've got a further question about how do you explain your connection? I think you would talk more so about where you learned rose mauling, that connection to the tradition. Like, how was this passed down to you? Any other questions that I can answer? All right, I'm not seeing or hearing any other questions come through, so I'll just say thank you for joining us this evening, and we hope to hear from you.